That wind's gonna be a problem today. Do your best to kind of keep your hand over it. Y'all tell us if there's too much wind noise for you. It is a beautiful Sunday morning. We are having some beautiful late April cool temperatures, which are kind of nice. It's funny, someone said to me already this morning, this weather is crazy. And I'm like, that's Texas, man. This weather's always crazy. We never know exactly what to get, which is part of the idea of why I love so much doing these lives every Sunday morning, doing this kind of like visual journaling, because whether we know exactly what time of year this exact thing's going to happen, we know it's coming at some point. Now, it may be early March, it may be late April, it may be, we're getting into that transition. I was actually making a joke this last week that, goodness, my hair had looked so good for so long. I just thought maybe I was going to get through the spring without having all the crazy frizz. Oh no, it's April. Here we are. We finally got there, and here we are. Now we're having a nice little cool front again that'll dry the air out a little bit. But it's been nice to have the rain. I'm really grateful for that. And we're going to be exploding this next week with all of this rain.
Every Sunday morning, we never know what we'll be wearing.
We never know what we'll be wearing. I never know if I'm going to need like an umbrella or like have on my full-on like bikini because it's so freaking hot out here, right?
Have you done one of these in a bikini?
I don't think so. Not yet.
Dare to dream. Dare to dream.
You never know. So as you come on, be sure to say hi, and
the hellos are pouring in.
Awesome, good. And if you have any specific questions, please be sure to ask them from me. One of the things I really like the best about this is the opportunity for interactive. I have even gone back and gone in and answered some questions as I've had a chance to kind of go back as other people have caught things later when it wasn't live. And then, of course, every Sunday I will put the last week's recorded version up on YouTube. So today you can catch last week's if you didn't already. It'll be up on YouTube. If you haven't already subscribed to my YouTube channel, I would ask that you please do that as a favor to me. This really helps me get to that point where I can begin treating that as a public space, but an actual stream that has a return on investment for me. I don't know if you all know this, but the subscriber limit in order to create a little bit of a sustainable return on investment for putting your time into videos is 1,000. And so I'm pretty far off from that, but would like to get there someday. So as a favor to me, it will also benefit you, I believe. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and it's free to do that. All right, let's get talking about what we have to chat about with the garden right now and the kinds of things that I'm personally dealing with. And one of the things I like to do is if I get into conversations with folks, either in person or online, specific questions that they're asking or dealing with, those are some things I like to talk about on these. And then, of course, anything that I'm personally dealing with, something I'm learning about, something I'm doing some research on, and share with you what I know about that. So I want to talk about two things very specifically today, and that is our squash pollination. That's one thing, and how I'm handling that, and potentially also other types of pollination that are required for your garden as well. And then in addition to that, I want to talk about onions so that we have a little bit more, and I know there is some information to learn about onions that I, over the years, have had to pick up by just experimenting, looking at things, and getting some experience. Same thing with the pollination of the squash. One of the things you might not know just kind of naturally is that when you're talking about the pollination of plants, heirloom variety plants, oftentimes you'll run into situations where you've got different types of squash, cucumbers, tomatoes, things like that, that will have within the same plant breed, same plant variety. So let's say we picked a certain type of yellow squash variety, right? In an heirloom plant or seed, that particular variety may have both male plants and female plants. And or on the same plant, you may have both male and female. Now, there's a scientific name for what that is actually called. I don't have that at the top of my brain right now. But that's some things you can look into, especially if you're looking for cucumbers when you're purchasing cucumber seeds in the heirloom variety. Now, if you purchase seeds where they do a whole lot of hybridization or other types of genetic modifications, you probably won't have the same issue. So if oftentimes you've just gone in and purchased plants from the nursery, specific squash plants from the nursery, or if you've gone into a lot of the big box stores and just purchased whatever burpee seeds or whatever variety of seeds that they're carrying there, they're probably not going to even be selling you the types of plants that I'm talking about, because they know that most of the gardeners don't have enough experience with that to separate, and or if they do have experience or understand it, they're just not interested in messing with it at all. So they just want to purchase all of the seeds that are going to give them exactly what they need for open pollination. But if you're purchasing plants off of Territorial Seed Company, Johnny's Seed Company, Southern, any of those kind of heirloom, larger scale, people that are really getting into understanding how gardening and heirloom varieties work and doing hybridization of their own and things like that, then you will actually have to look for that information and make sure that you have it available for you as well. Yes.
Sid says, interesting, because I have had plants in the past that would have 0 female flowers the entire season.
Exactly, and that's what I'm about to show you today. Because I've talked a lot about us there being a need for us to probably have to do some of our own pollinating this year, especially because the bees, the honeybees, and the very specific bees that pollinate squash are much more limited. And even I noticed last year when I had quite a few pollinators in my backyard that I still was having some pollination issues. And so one of the things I mentioned from the very beginning of the season as squash started setting on is that we're probably going to have to go into our kids' little paintbrush section or go to the craft store and just buy some cheap paintbrushes and get yourself a paintbrush so that you can help pollinate your squash. Now, I made a joke this morning about that our little pollination juice, male pollination juice on the end of this pollinator here. Joe, did you have a little funny
Nope.
quip? No, nothing.
Nope. This is your video, love.
I gave him a direct order that if he made his funny little song for everyone, then I would be his best friend forever.
Honey, why am I completely blocking out what you're talking about? Give me a hint. I'll do it.
Your pollination song.
Oh, from Grease 2. Reproduction, reproduction, make my stamen go berserk.
There you go.
Just Google Grease 2 and it's really everything that you need, reproduction, and it's all you need to know about flower pollination.
Well, there you go. My
so what's on the end of that
pollination
paintbrush?
juice there is just pollen.
Pollen that you've, go ahead.
I brushed
I'm very curious about this because I've never watched you do it before.
Now, okay, so here's the thing you need to look at. A lot of these plants here have, as I have seen it, don't even have any male flowers on them. It looks like I have mostly female flowers. But I am starting to notice that some of these may be coming on some male.
You gotta
so
slow down. How do you know what
this is a male flower, I'm pretty certain. But all of these are female flowers.
Now, why
all
do you
of
know
these
that?
are female flowers. Because, look, do you see that the female flower is this tiny little thing? It's already got the fruit on it. And the flower stays a lot tighter and more closed. And then this one is already starting to shoot up a big male flower, and it doesn't have
the fruit behind it.
It doesn't have the fruit behind it.
I see.
So what happens then is these early female fruits, like this one, this is a good example. The flower has already fallen off of it. It means it hasn't been pollinated. This is just going to fall off or rot anyway. I actually pulled one off this morning. But so I need this one to get big and happy, and then I'm going to take my little brush like that, go down inside of it, and you can even, ideally you wait for it to open up on its own, but if you're getting kind of in a situation where you don't have this available for you, you may have to go in and open it up. So here's one that is a male that is a little bit bigger and a little bit more mature. And if it weren't for this rain, these would probably be all nice and open this morning, but because of the amount of rain we've had recently, so you would just simply go into the flower, and I've got some I'll show you in another part of the garden that are already opened up.
Are you hurting the flower?
Probably, yes. Another thing you can do with these male flowers, okay, now see, this is where I got all this.
Here, move your paintbrush a little bit. There you go.
You see all that flower pollen that's falling down there? That's where I got all of that from. Just like that.
You're being a bee right now.
Exactly. And then I'm going to go in over here and pollinate her. See? It's really not that big of a deal. It's kind of fun, especially if you have a small garden.
Yeah, these leaves are all in the way.
Sorry.
It's all right.
So I'm pollinating her. Now over here I've got, it looks like this is a male, and that's probably where I got that original stuff from. I'm going to pollinate this little female right here. And just every morning or every once in a while, go back and do that kind of thing
So
around
again,
your garden.
you're duplicating the job of bees and other pollinating insects.
Yep. Some of the wind may do some of that for you as well. Now, one of the things you might run into, like in my garden, because I have an integrated garden, I may be cross-pollinating. So I may have pollinated something over here that came from another flower. I'm not super like controlling about that kind of stuff. If you are, then just clean your brush off or get a different brush before you pollinate the next variety. But because I do an integrated garden and I've got all kinds of different flowers going on, they're all cross-pollinating anyways in a weird way. So that's it. That's all we're doing. We're just going in there and going kind of diddling our flowers a little bit, basically.
So let me ask you a question, a couple questions, follow-ups. Here is another fruit baby with no flower on the end.
Yes, that one hasn't been pollinated most likely.
Earlier you said that will probably fall off.
Yep.
And that's because the pollination is required to get past some kind of growth stage?
Well, it hasn't, yes. If it hasn't been pollinated, then it'll just drop its fruit. And you know what? That's kind of not much different than us going in and knocking off some of the fruit ourselves, which is important for, like, okay, I talk a lot about this when I talk about fruit trees. Got another one over here. I'll show you in just a second. When I talk about fruit trees, I often tell you, make sure you just keep knocking the flowers off till the plant gets a little bit bigger. Well, nature is going to do a lot of this stuff for itself. When you're talking about a big giant squash plant, an heirloom variety that is going to do all of its own work for itself without us having to create some hybridization that does the work for you, doesn't require pollination or something like that, then what happens is the plant will put on all these babies, but then there's not enough reproduction to make the babies. So it just drops the babies out. I mean, women know how that works. We do a lot of that type of stuff in our own human body, right? And so that's all that's happening. It's naturally knocking off the ones that are not being fertilized, basically. And so that's what will happen with that. Now you can see that there's some in here. Look, this is a nice big male flower here. But I also don't really have any female flowers in there right now.
And you know that it's male because there's no fruit attached to the back of it.
Correct. It's usually a lot bigger open, big fat open, and its stamen looks different. The female stamen it's got like 3 little prongs or 4 little prongs. The male one has 1 big prong, and it's got a bunch of stuff on it. So now I'm just going to cross-pollinate. Yeah, here we go.
Now, is that a problem?
It can be, because I'll have different fruit. If I took this over to that one over there, then I'd start creating different squash. I'd start hybridizing squash, basically, on my own. Okay, but this would be the one that I would go into. These two are the same, but I don't have any over here that are ready for that. Okay?
Oh, there's no female flowers to do anything to that with that pollen.
Correct,
I got
exactly.
You. All right.
Okay, so let's come back over here to this garden. Now you can do a very similar thing to your tomatoes. I don't have enough information about tomato flowers to tell you like, oh, that's the female or male or anything like that. But with a different brush, not this one, I could take and just do the same little thing. Just go around and kind of like a little bee, like this is just touch them all, and that'll just help make a few more of them pollinate. But again, remember, if you want your tomato plant to be really strong and healthy, don't leave all the flowers on it. Let some of the flowers get knocked off. Knock some of the flowers off. Same thing with your peppers. If you've got a tiny little pepper plant that's got covered in lots and lots of flowers on it, knock some of them off. Some of them are already starting to turn into peppers, and you're like, oh, great. Okay, knock a bunch of the other flowers off, because it needs to be able to have enough energy to really make big, nice, beautiful fruit for you.
Are these your first tomatoes since the freeze?
Well, I mean, I have a lot of tomatoes right now. So some of them, yes, they're some of the first ones. I have quite a few tomatoes already setting here and at the farm as well. So like over here, you can see, on this one, I have mostly male flowers right now. These are all male flowers. All of those. And you see, I don't see any fruiting flowers yet on this one. So I'll keep an eye on this one. What it ends up doing is start looking for the female flowers so that I can start cross-pollinating them as well.
So since there's no female flowers there, you don't need to brush this plant with the
Not right now, because there's nothing to brush it to. Now, one thing that there is that, and like I said at the beginning of this, you will need to take a look because certain varieties, I don't know enough about whether squash has specific varieties of male, female. They might, or whether they're always, squash is always a type of plant that's going to have both male and female on it. Cucumbers, I know for a fact you have to look at the cucumbers to make sure you're not buying some that are going to be, well, you can buy a variety of cucumber that is going to have one male plant and one female plant. It's going to have all male flowers, all female flowers on it. If you're going to plant a lot of that particular variety, but if you're only going to plant a few plants or a few seeds, then you may end up with all male seeds or all female seeds. And so that's something to keep in mind. So if you're a small scale gardener, a backyard gardener, your best bet is to make sure when you purchase cucumber seeds that you're purchasing the ones that have both male and female flowers on the same plant. Does that make sense to everyone? If you have specific questions about this, just ask me because I might not have said it. Oh my God, look at that pretty little green bird. Okay, we live in the birdiest city in America, if you didn't already know that, and it is migration season. So you should be watching the birds because they are fantastic right now. We have all the colors. They're so beautiful.
Can I put out some bird seed?
I guess. I don't know why you would need to. There's plenty of things to attract the birds.
Well, so that they
here.
actually drop in and say hello for a longer period of time.
When my sunflowers go crazy.
Why would you roll your eyes?
When my sunflowers go crazy, do you see all my sunflowers over there and over there and over there and over there? There's going to be plenty of stuff for all the birds to be having.
Amber asks, kind of a broad question, what happens if you cross-pollinate?
You end up with weird shaped squash that you don't really know what it is. We used to have that a lot at the Learning Garden. We had these like random like white, yellow, green looking zucchini type things.
I mean, they're still edible. They're still okay.
Absolutely. They're still edible. You just have a completely different variety. And if you're one of those people that saves the seeds, then you have created a completely new hybridized squash that is, we actually used to call it the Learning Garden squash. It's the Learning Garden squash. People would say, well, what kind of squash is that? It's the Learning Garden squash. We don't know. It cross-pollinated. So, okay, so that's really mostly what I had to say about pollination and doing some pollination for yourself. And like I said, if you have specific questions, I didn't make that clear, please just ask and I will help you out with that. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is onions, because there's actually a lot to know about onions, and I spent time this morning talking to somebody about onions, and then I also spent some time with one of my clients recently talking about onions as well, and so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about them this morning. Now, I have a big portion of onions right here so that you can look at some different sizes of onions and things like that, and then it kind of, if you back around and look this way, you can see that there's another size of onion right here. Now, I grow in our area I don't grow from seed currently. That doesn't mean that I won't in the future, but if you're going to try to grow onions from seed, you need to plant those seeds all the way back in like July, okay? So that by the time you get to October, about October time, you have the tiny little onion plants that you can then plant in the ground. What I did this year, and will probably do most often, is order from a company. If you're here in Texas like I am, I order from a company called Dixondale Farms, and I plant my onions in October. I purchased what are called long day onions. Is that right? No, sorry, take that back. I purchased what are called short day onions. Sometimes I always get that confused in my brain. So basically what that means is that they're going to bulb in the amount of time that we have to get them to actually grow to a full-size onion and then actually bulb before we're ready to pick them. So what that means is that we're putting them in the ground in October. We're letting them grow through the cool season. They start bulbing after we get it through pretty much the winter time, which is where we are right now. And then they bulb until they start to die. And then when the tops start to die, that's when we start pulling them out of the ground. And then we can start drying them out, and that's when you end up with those big beautiful 1015 onions, the big beautiful red onions and vidalias and all of those white onions that we really like down here. Those are the big bulbing onions. Yes.
I bought some beautiful big bulb onions with the stalk, what do you call this, on top, still on them at the farmer's market this last week, that were grown down in poteet. So they're pulling those onions out of the ground now.
Yes, and those are that's what I would consider a little bit of a younger onion. It's just not a dried, cured bulb, okay? And those are completely okay to eat. And it is something that we always did at the Learning Garden. I've always done. I like to plant my onions really, really close together, and then I thin them basically. And so I expect that's probably what they're doing down where you ended up getting them from. They're probably thinning them. So they're thinning out some of the younger ones that already have a nice sized bulb on them, but the top part is still very much so alive. Okay, and so what happens with us as we start to get the nice sized bulbing part, so let's say this one. Now mine are all very strong and healthy, and so I'm not quite ready to do this. But if you have some that have a bulb this big or bigger and you're already seeing a lot of death going on up here at the top, one thing you can do is just push the onion down, just tip it over, and then let it continue to keep growing. The green won't be dead at that point. The bulb will continue to grow. It'll just start putting its energy into sugar, all of that stuff we've talked about, into the bulb part of it. Another thing I could do is actually pull some dirt from down here. See if I can do it with my hands without having a little... I can pull some dirt from down here, pack it around the bulb, just to give the bulb some more oomph to keep going, and I can keep doing that. So that's something you can do to kind of really give the bulb some more girth to grow into. But really, we don't really start full on pulling them out until they die. The tops are knocked down, the plant's starting to die, the green part is all dead and doesn't have any life, doesn't have any green left anymore. That's when, and at that point your bulb is nice and fat. At that point you can pull the whole bulb out and take that little bit of string or whatever that's left on the plant and tie it up on something like this. Last year I just took something like this and just kind of wrapped them through there and just kind of hung them down so that then you've got airflow on both sides to let them cure out and dry out. But there's nothing wrong with pulling them out early and using them if you want to. I just don't really have any yet that I'm quite ready for that. Let me show you some other sizes I have going back this direction.
Victoria says, I can hear your woodpecker, and I guess we're immune to it because I didn't hear it.
Yeah, no, my woodpecker's very...
We got a woodpecker that lives on this utility pole, and we've got a woodpecker that lives near our chimney and kind of wakes us up every morning.
I believe it was last spring we had like 3 or 4 juvenile ones around too. So we had a family of them around.
And some of our favorite thing to do is to grab a cup of coffee in the morning or a glass of iced tea at night and sit in the backyard. We call it backyard TV.
Some of my favorite things to do is in the morning when it's pecking on our fireplace chimney. Is to go and yell at it and tell it to go away.
Yeah, Victoria says it might have been my woodpecker. It was over visiting.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, look at this. So you can see this one's already started to tip over on its own anyways, so I could push that back but you see how alive this is still? This is still very alive. But when you start to get to the point where it's starting to bulb already and it's starting to flop over already, then it'll start pushing its energy down into the bulb and this part will start to die back. But you can see here some of the same thing. I mean, this is still hardy, right? This is still good. This is still strong and healthy. So I'm going to keep letting them grow a little bit more before I start tipping them over. But I want them to start putting their attention into the bulb very soon. You can see this one over here, some of these over here. I think these are like the 10-15s. They look like they're getting a little bit more yellow. I'm not 100% sure because I'm not always as good at marking them all. But it just takes time, and really, if you think about it, okay, so if it's already got a flower on it, here's another thing I just talked to a client about the other day. If it's got a flower on it, then go ahead and knock it over. Because those are the ones that, and someone asked me, well, can you eat the flower? Yes, you can eat the flower. You can, whatever. You can harvest it out. I mean, there's a lot of personal choice when it comes to how you do your onions. Like I said, I like to plant my onions very close together and then thin some of them out when I'm dealing with a little bit of a different garden than this one over here. So if I was able to show you my farm garden, it looks a little bit differently. It's got rows of onions, and when they start to get too close together, when the bulbs start getting really big, then I've got 2 big bulbing onions right next to each other. I want this one to get bigger. I'm going to pull this one. I'm going to go ahead and pull this one out. And then this is the young onion, just like what we were purchasing and eating. And one of the things that I always find, like if you're if you're a backyard gardener and you're just feeding your family, there's really no need for you to early harvest unless you just are looking for that produce today. But when you're someone that's trying to sell like at a farmer's market or something like that, you want to start getting some of that stuff on your table as early as you possibly can. That's kind of how we did it with the learning garden. It
entices people to come back next week.
Exactly.
That's the place that has the onions. That's the vendor that has the onions.
Exactly. And so that's part of the reason why you see some of that stuff on the tables. And then there's different types of onions too, like shallot onions and bunching onions and some of those like green onions where they're not going to bulb up. And if you ever pick up any of those little onions that you can purchase at most of the big box stores, those are usually the long day onions, and they're never going to really bulb nicely. So once they start to get that big nice stalk and have a little bit of a bulb on them, go ahead and pull them out, because you're never going to, and that may actually have been what you brought home, was a long day onion, because it did kind of look like that. I'm not 100% sure about that, but it doesn't matter whether you tip the tops over on those or not. They're never going to bulb in our area, because we just don't have a long enough cool season, what they really like, in order to get them to the point of making a nice fat bulb.
All I know is that those onions that I bought went straight into a pot of greens.
That's exactly right. There's no reason not to use them. And if you've got squash that's not putting on any female flowers, then use all those beautiful male flowers and cook with them, because they're so amazing. Last year, about this time, I think we were starting to make arugula and squash blossom pizzas for the podcast. So there's lots of things you can do.
Frying the squash blossoms when I did a fry night.
Exactly. So those are the kinds of things you can do with it. So yeah, so that's the main things I wanted to talk about today. Of course, all your flowers should be popping like beautiful. And after these rains, I'm telling you, you guys, we are going to be in high growth. I mean, look at this stuff. It is going to take off, because now we have the long day sun. We've gotten some rain, and everything is about to just explode. So be ready. And if you have some weeding you need to do, and you know it's going to be a problem for you, now's the time to do it, because the ground is soft. And it's going to be way easier to pop out some of those weeds. So I hope you guys will definitely check out my YouTube channel, subscribe, and for sure tomorrow listen to the newest episode of Dinner Table Talks. Joe told me yesterday that we're only about 19 episodes from finishing season 2. So we're about to roll into season 3. If you haven't listened to the podcast, we hope that you will join us at the dinner table. We'll see you soon. Bye. Love you guys.